My mother-in-law deliberately invited my husband's ex to every single family gathering while telling me she's practically family, deal with it, and when I confronted my husband, he said they're just friends, you're being jealous and dramatic, so I hired a private investigator who discovered my mill was trying to get them back together and had been secretly funding my husband's business trips that were actually romantic getaways with his ex. My name is Amanda and I've been married to my husband Jake for 3 years. What should have been the happiest time of my life has instead been a nightmare thanks to my manipulative mother-in-law Patricia and her obsession with Jake's ex-girlfriend Melissa. I'm 28 years old, work as a graphic designer, and thought I was gaining a loving family when I married Jake. Instead, I got a front row seat to the most toxic family dynamic I've ever experienced. Jake and I met 4 years ago through mutual friends at a house party. He was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me as a person rather than just trying to impress me. We hit it off immediately and started dating seriously within a few weeks. Jake worked in sales for a tech company and had this infectious enthusiasm for life that drew me to him. He seemed like the kind of man who would make a great husband and father someday. The only shadow over our early relationship was Jake's ex-girlfriend Melissa, who he'd dated for 4 years before we met. According to Jake, their relationship had ended mutually when Melissa moved across the country for graduate school. He assured me that they'd remained friends but that there were no romantic feelings left between them. He spoke about her the way most people talk about old college friends, with fondness but no lingering attachment. I met Melissa for the first time about 6 months into dating Jake, when she came back to town for a visit. Jake wanted us all to have dinner together so I could meet this important person from his past. Melissa was beautiful, successful, and had this easy confidence that made her instantly likable. She was pursuing a PhD in psychology and seemed to have her life completely figured out. She was also very friendly to me, asking about my work and my relationship with Jake in a way that seemed genuine rather than territorial. After that dinner, I felt comfortable with Melissa's place in Jake's life. She lived 2,000 miles away, had her own career and relationships, and seemed to genuinely support Jake's happiness with me. When Jake and I got engaged after 2 years of dating, Melissa even sent a thoughtful congratulations card saying how happy she was that Jake had found someone who made him laugh the way I did. The problems started when I met Jake's mother Patricia. From our very first meeting, it was clear that Patricia had strong opinions about who Jake should be with, and I wasn't her choice. She was polite but cold, asking pointed questions about my family background, my career prospects, and my plans for children. When Jake left the room during that first dinner, Patricia looked me directly in the eye and said, "Jake has very high standards. I hope you can live up to them." Patricia made no secret of her preference for Melissa. She would bring up Melissa constantly in conversation, talking about her academic achievements, her career prospects, and how well she'd fit into their family. She'd show me photos of family vacations that included Melissa and talk about how much she missed having her around. When I tried to change the subject, Patricia would say things like, "Oh, you don't mind me talking about Melissa, do you? She's practically family." The situation escalated dramatically after Jake and I got married. Patricia began inviting Melissa to every single family gathering without mentioning it to me beforehand. I'd show up to birthday parties, holiday dinners, and casual family barbecues only to find Melissa there, always seated in a place of honor and treated like a beloved daughter rather than an ex-girlfriend. The first time this happened was at Jake's cousin's graduation party. I walked into Patricia's backyard expecting a casual family celebration and found Melissa laughing with Jake's aunts and uncles like she'd never left. Patricia greeted me with a tight smile and said, "Oh Amanda, you remember Melissa, don't you? She was in town for a conference so of course I had to invite her. Family is family." Jake seemed genuinely surprised to see Melissa there, but he didn't say anything to his mother about the inappropriateness of the situation. Instead, he just went along with it, chatting with Melissa like old times while I stood there feeling like an outsider at my own family gathering. When I pulled Jake aside later to express my discomfort, he said I was being oversensitive and that Melissa was just a friend. This pattern continued for months. Every family event included Melissa, always with the same excuse from Patricia: Melissa was in town for work, or it was a holiday and she didn't have family nearby, or she'd been going through a hard time and needed support. Patricia would seat Melissa next to Jake at dinner tables and include her in family photos while I stood awkwardly to the side. The most infuriating part was how everyone else in the family went along with it. Jake's siblings, his cousins, even his father seemed to think it was perfectly normal for an ex-girlfriend to be included in every family gathering. When I try to express my discomfort to other family members, they'd say things like, "Oh, Melissa's always been part of the family," or "Patricia just has a big heart." Jake's response to my concerns was always the same: I was being jealous and insecure. He'd tell me that Melissa was just a friend and that his family's acceptance of her was a good thing because it showed they weren't petty or vindictive. He'd say that confident women should be able to handle their partner having female friends, and that my discomfort said more about my own insecurities than about anything inappropriate happening. The breaking point came at our first wedding anniversary party. Patricia had offered to host a celebration for us, and I was looking forward to finally being the center of attention at a family gathering. I spent weeks planning my outfit and thinking about how nice it would be to celebrate this milestone with Jake's family accepting me as one of their own. When we arrived at Patricia's house, Melissa was not only there but was wearing a dress almost identical to mine. Patricia had apparently told her what I was planning to wear and helped her coordinate. During the party, Patricia made a toast about how wonderful it was to have all the important women in Jake's life together, looking meaningfully between Melissa and me. She then launched into a speech about how some people come into our lives for a season, while others are meant to be there forever. That night I told Jake that either Melissa stopped being invited to family events, or I would stop attending them. Jake accused me of giving him an ultimatum and said he wouldn't be manipulated into choosing between his family and me. He said that Melissa had been part of his family longer than I had and that I needed to find a way to deal with the situation like an adult. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. If Jake and his family were going to gaslight me about what was happening, I needed proof of what was really going on. I hired a private investigator named Rebecca Chen who specialized in domestic situations. I gave her all the information I had about Patricia's behavior and asked her to look into whether there was more to the story than what I was being told. Rebecca's investigation revealed things that were even worse than I'd suspected. She discovered that Patricia had been in regular contact with Melissa for the entire duration of my relationship with Jake, not just since our marriage. They talked on the phone at least twice a week and exchanged emails almost daily. Patricia had been giving Melissa detailed updates about my relationship with Jake, including private information about our fights, our finances, and our marriage plans. Even more shocking, Rebecca found evidence that Patricia had been actively working to sabotage my relationship with Jake from the beginning. She'd been telling Melissa about every problem Jake and I had, encouraging her to reach out to him during difficult times, and even suggesting specific things Melissa could say to make Jake question his commitment to me. The most damning evidence was financial records showing that Patricia had been sending money to Melissa to fund her trips back to town. What Jake and I thought were work conferences or family visits were actually romantic getaways that Patricia was secretly financing. Rebecca found hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and even payments for couples' activities that made it clear these weren't innocent friendship visits. But the worst discovery was that Patricia had been funding Jake's business trips as well. Over the past year, Jake had taken several weekend trips that he claimed were for work conferences or client meetings. Rebecca found evidence that Patricia had been paying for Jake's travel expenses to meet Melissa in various cities across the country. The trips coincided with Melissa's academic conferences, and hotel records showed they'd been staying in the same rooms. When Rebecca showed me the evidence, I felt like my entire world had collapsed. My husband had been cheating on me with his ex-girlfriend, facilitated and funded by his own mother. Every time I'd expressed concerns about Melissa's presence in our lives, Jake had made me feel crazy and jealous when he'd actually been having an affair with her. I made copies of all the evidence and decided to confront Jake and Patricia together. I wanted to see their faces when I presented proof of their betrayal, and I wanted to make sure they couldn't coordinate their stories or blame each other for what had been happening. I arranged a family dinner at Patricia's house, telling them I wanted to discuss some concerns about our marriage and get their advice. Jake seemed pleased that I was finally reaching out to his mother for support, and Patricia acted gracious about helping me work through my insecurity issues. During dinner, I waited until everyone was relaxed and comfortable before pulling out the folder of evidence. I started by reading some of the emails between Patricia and Melissa, including ones where Patricia described me as temporary and assured Melissa that Jake would come to his senses eventually. Patricia's face went white, but she tried to maintain her composure. She claimed that her correspondence with Melissa was just friendship, and that I was misinterpreting innocent conversations. Jake looked confused and asked what was going on. That's when I pulled out the hotel receipts and financial records showing the funded trips. I read the dates aloud and asked Jake to explain why he'd been staying in hotel rooms with Melissa while telling me he was at business conferences. I also showed them the bank records proving that Patricia had been paying for these romantic getaways. Jake's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of denying the affairs or expressing shock at his mother's manipulation, he got angry at me for hiring a private investigator. He accused me of violating his privacy and said that spying on him showed how little I trusted him. He claimed that whatever had happened between him and Melissa was complicated and that I wouldn't understand the history they shared. Patricia's response was even more infuriating. She said that she'd only been trying to help Jake figure out his true feelings and that she'd always known Melissa was his real soulmate. She claimed that my marriage to Jake was a mistake and that she'd been protecting her son from making the biggest error of his life. She actually said that she'd been doing me a favor by helping Jake realize he belonged with someone else. I looked at both of them and realized that this wasn't a betrayal that had gotten out of hand, it was a deliberate, calculated campaign to destroy my marriage and get Jake back together with Melissa. Patricia had never accepted me as Jake's wife and had been actively working to undermine our relationship from the very beginning. I told them both that I was filing for divorce and that I'd be including Patricia's financial records in my legal proceedings. I said that funding her son's extramarital affairs might have some interesting legal implications that my lawyer would be exploring. I also told them that I'd be sending copies of all the evidence to every family member who had made me feel crazy for objecting to Melissa's constant presence. Jake tried to stop me from leaving, saying we could work things out and that he'd never meant for things to go this far. He claimed that he loved me and that his relationship with Melissa was just unfinished business he needed to resolve. Patricia was less conciliatory, telling me that I was being vindictive and that Jake would be better off without someone so jealous and controlling. I walked out of that house feeling hurt and betrayed, but also relieved to finally know the truth. The gaslighting was over, and I had proof that my instincts had been right all along. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since I confronted Jake and Patricia with the evidence of their betrayal, and the fallout has been everything I hoped it would be. I wanted to update everyone on what's happened since I exposed their affair conspiracy. First, I followed through on my threat to share the evidence with Jake's extended family. I sent detailed emails to his siblings, cousins, aunts, and uncles, including copies of the most damning financial records and correspondence between Patricia and Melissa. The response was swift and brutal for both Jake and his mother. Jake's younger sister Emma called me within hours of receiving my email. She was horrified and said she'd always thought something was off about how often Melissa appeared at family gatherings, but she'd never imagined the level of manipulation involved. Emma apologized for not speaking up sooner and said the family owed me a massive apology for enabling Patricia's behavior. Jake's father David was apparently furious when he learned what his wife had been doing. According to Emma, David had no idea about the financial assistance Patricia had been providing or the extent of her involvement in sabotaging our marriage. He felt betrayed and humiliated that his wife had been secretly funding an affair behind his back. Emma told me that her parents had been having explosive fights ever since my revelation. The most satisfying response came from Jake's paternal grandmother, who apparently unleashed decades of suppressed frustration with Patricia's controlling behavior. She called Patricia directly and told her that she'd finally gone too far, and that her manipulation of Jake's relationships was destroying the family. She also called Jake and told him he was a fool for letting his mother ruin his marriage to a good woman. Jake has been trying to contact me constantly, alternating between apologies and anger. His voicemail started with him claiming that he'd ended things with Melissa and wanted to work on our marriage. When I didn't respond, his messages became more desperate, with him saying he'd go to counseling and cut off contact with his mother if that's what it took to save our relationship. The most recent voicemails have been angry, with Jake claiming that I've destroyed his relationship with his family and that I'm being vindictive. He's apparently furious that I shared private information with his relatives and thinks I should have handled things privately. The fact that he's more upset about his family knowing what he did than about actually doing it tells me everything I need to know about his character. Patricia has been spreading her own version of events, claiming that I was an unstable wife who drove Jake to seek comfort elsewhere. She's telling people that Melissa was just being a good friend to Jake during a difficult time and that I'm exaggerating the extent of their relationship. However, the documentary evidence I provided makes her claims pretty hard to believe. Melissa apparently had no idea that Patricia was funding her trips or that Jake was lying to me about the nature of his travel. According to one of Jake's cousins who knows her personally, Melissa was under the impression that Jake and I were separated and working toward divorce. She thought she was dating a man who was in the process of ending his marriage, not having an affair with someone who was lying to his wife. When Melissa learned the truth about the situation, she immediately ended her relationship with Jake and sent me a letter apologizing for her role in the destruction of my marriage. She explained that Patricia had been telling her for months that Jake was unhappy with me and was planning to leave. Melissa said she would never have gotten involved if she'd known Jake was actively lying to me about their relationship. The private investigator Rebecca has been helpful in documenting everything from my divorce proceedings. My lawyer says that Patricia's financial involvement in the affair could be relevant to property division and spousal support calculations. The fact that marital assets were essentially being used to fund Jake's extramarital relationship strengthens my position significantly. Update 2. 2 months after the confrontation, and the consequences keep getting better. Jake and Patricia's family relationships have been permanently damaged by their betrayal, and I'm watching them face the natural results of their actions. Patricia and David are now separated and heading toward divorce. David finally learned the full extent of his wife's financial manipulation when he reviewed their bank statements and credit card bills. In addition to funding Jake's affairs, Patricia had been secretly spending money on expensive gifts for Melissa and even helped pay for some of her graduate school expenses. David felt so betrayed by the financial deception that he moved out of their house and filed for legal separation. The divorce proceedings between Patricia and David have been ugly, with David's lawyer arguing that Patricia's secret spending on Jake's affair constitutes financial infidelity. David is seeking to recover the money Patricia spent facilitating the affair, claiming it was marital property that was misused without his knowledge or consent. Patricia is apparently shocked that her husband isn't standing by her and keeps insisting that she was only trying to help her son find happiness. Jake has lost significant standing within his extended family. His aunts and uncles are disgusted by his willingness to let his mother manipulate and humiliate his wife, and several of them have stopped inviting him to family gatherings. His cousins have been particularly harsh, with several telling him that his behavior was cowardly and that he doesn't deserve forgiveness from anyone. The most dramatic consequence has been Jake's relationship with his own siblings. Emma has completely cut contact with him, saying that watching him gaslight me for months while carrying on an affair was too disgusting to forgive. Jake's older brother Mark told him that he's embarrassed to be related to him and that his actions reflect poorly on how their parents raised them. Jake's professional life has also suffered unexpected consequences. It turns out that some of his business conferences were actually scheduled during important work meetings, and his absence hurt several major client relationships. When his boss learned that Jake had been lying about business travel while actually having personal getaways, he was put on probation and removed from several high-profile accounts. Melissa has completely disappeared from their lives, apparently mortified by her unwitting role in the affair conspiracy. She sent Jake a letter telling him that she never wanted to see him again and that she was disgusted by his willingness to lie to his wife while pursuing her. She also blocked Patricia on all social media and told mutual friends that she felt manipulated and used by the entire situation. My divorce proceedings have been moving smoothly thanks to the overwhelming evidence of Jake's infidelity and Patricia's financial manipulation. Jake's lawyer advised him to accept my proposed settlement rather than fighting it, since the documented affair and family conspiracy would likely result in him receiving even less if we went to trial. The most satisfying development has been the social consequences for Patricia within her community. Word has spread among her social circle about her role in sabotaging her son's marriage, and she's found herself increasingly isolated. Several of her friends have distanced themselves from her, apparently appalled by the level of manipulation she engaged in. Patricia's church group, where she'd been very active, asked her to step down from her leadership positions after learning about her behavior. The pastor apparently felt that her actions were inconsistent with the family values the church promoted, and several congregation members complained about her continued involvement in church activities. Update 3. 6 months after exposing the affair conspiracy, I'm finally ready to share the most recent developments. My divorce has been finalized, and I'm moving forward with my life while Jake and Patricia continue to face consequences for their actions. The divorce settlement was everything I could have hoped for. Jake agreed to give me the house, most of our savings, and a significant portion of his retirement accounts. My lawyer argued successfully that the money Patricia spent funding Jake's affairs was marital property that had been misappropriated, and Jake was required to compensate me for those funds. Patricia's divorce from David has been equally favorable to the wronged spouse. David was awarded the majority of their assets, including their house and most of their retirement savings. The court found that Patricia's secret spending on Jake's affair constituted a significant breach of fiduciary duty, and she was required to account for every dollar she'd spent facilitating the relationship with Melissa. Jake has been struggling with the social and professional fallout from his actions. He was ultimately fired from his job after his boss learned the full extent of his dishonesty about business travel. Apparently, Jake's lies about conference attendance had caused the company to miss out on several important networking opportunities, and his reputation within the industry has been damaged. Without his job and with most of his assets going to me in the divorce, Jake has been forced to move back in with Patricia, who is now living in a small apartment after losing her house to David. The two of them are apparently miserable living together, with Patricia blaming Jake for the destruction of her marriage and Jake blaming Patricia for manipulating him into an affair that cost him everything. The most ironic development is that Jake has been trying to reconnect with Melissa, apparently hoping to salvage something from the wreckage of his life. Melissa has completely rejected his attempts at contact and even threatened to get a restraining order if he continues trying to reach her. She's apparently dating someone new and wants nothing to do with the toxic family drama she got caught up in. Jake's relationship with his siblings remains destroyed. Emma got married last month and didn't invite Jake to the wedding, telling family members that she couldn't celebrate love and commitment with someone who had shown such disrespect for marriage vows. Mark has also maintained his distance, occasionally checking on Jake's welfare but making it clear that he doesn't approve of his behavior. The extended family has largely sided with me in the aftermath of the divorce. Several of Jake's aunts and cousins have reached out to maintain contact with me, saying that they consider me family regardless of my legal relationship to Jake. They've invited me to family gatherings and made it clear that I'm more welcome than Jake or Patricia at this point. Patricia has become something of a cautionary tale within her social circles. Friends and acquaintances have shared the story of her manipulation and financial deception, and she's gained a reputation as someone who can't be trusted with family relationships or financial matters. She's had to find a new church and has struggled to rebuild her social life. The most satisfying consequence has been watching Jake and Patricia realize that their conspiracy has left them with nothing but each other. They destroyed multiple marriages, alienated their entire extended family, and lost most of their financial security, all in service of an affair that lasted only a few months and ended with Melissa wanting nothing to do with either of them. Meanwhile, I've been thriving in my new life. I got a promotion at work, bought a beautiful condo with my divorce settlement, and have been dating a wonderful man who treats me with the respect and honesty I should have had all along. When mutual friends tell me about Jake and Patricia's continued struggles, I feel nothing but satisfaction that justice has been served. Sometimes people ask if I feel bad about how thoroughly I exposed their betrayal and ruined their family relationships. The answer is absolutely not. They made the choice to betray me, gaslight me, and lie to me for years. All I did was make sure the truth came to light and that there were consequences for their actions. Jake and Patricia learned the hard way that when you manipulate and deceive people, eventually the truth comes out and there's a price to pay. They lost everything they cared about except each other, and now they get to live with the consequences of their choices every single day. I couldn't have asked for better revenge than watching them destroy their own lives through their greed and selfishness.